Hello everyone and welcome to Sea Power Naval Combat in the Missile Age. So this game just recently released on November 11th, 2024. It is in early access and it was developed by Triassic Games and published by Microprose. Yep, the same resurrected company that is bringing back so many of the simulations out there today, like Carrier Command 2. They're eventually going to be publishing Task Force Admiral and so on. So Sea Power is, if you don't know, a naval RTS/operations simulation where you command Cold War era naval forces, mostly of the NATO and Warsaw Pact, against each other in the 60s, 70s, and probably early 80s Cold War era. Everything from aircraft to ships to submarines. Now, this game is, as I said, is in early access, so a lot of it is subject to change. And currently, at the time I bought it, there was like a small discount on it, so I only paid about $45 for it, which some people say is a little bit steep, but I beg to differ. For what you get for this game already, I'd say $45 is pretty much a steal. Anyway, so this is going to be sort of my introductory video, and I'm going to do one of the scenarios here, a pretty simple one. And we're just going to play through it, and I'm going to provide some commentary. But I'm going to wait because there's a lot that's coming down the pike for this game in terms of like they're going to work on polishing up the artificial intelligence. They're eventually going to come out with a dynamic campaign. They're going to add more units and this, that, and the other. It is still very much a work in progress. But hopefully it'll kind of scratch the itch that is really itching now for... I'm really looking forward to Task Force Admiral, and this, you might be able to say, is almost like a Cold War era version of that game. And in many ways, the developers of this game drew direct inspiration from games like Jane's Fleet Command, although I've never played that game. That being said, I have played Command Modern Air and Naval Operations and the later Command Modern Operations, and I still have that. And I've been meaning to get back into that, and in many ways this game kind of reminds me of it, but it's like the really, really, really light version. So I'll talk more about that in a little bit, but we're gonna get started here and do the scenario Sub Duel. So there's an Alfa-class submarine trying to get to the Atlantic, and we're in a Flight 1 LA. Captain, the VLF transmission indicates the Alpha is in the area, so we have to find it.
Make my depth 340. Dive I.
Now, anyone who has played Cold Waters, of which I have not, though, a lot of the graphics and the gameplay elements look rather similar, especially in this scenario since we're in a submarine here. But one of the developers of Cold Waters broke off and formed Triassic Games. I can't remember his name, but he was in the Royal Swedish Navy. And another guy, I believe, served in the German Bundeswehr. And then there was like a graphical artist and stuff. So it's literally a 3-man development team. Teeny tiny, smaller than the development team for Task Force Admiral. But they have basically made all this in about 5 years. Oh, there we go. We got a sound contact. Well, we're streaming the towed array, and it's coming right at us. So as usual, I'm still learning this game, like many things. I've read the manual, which is still incomplete as of the time I'm playing this, but I'm kind of learning the camera controls and the game mechanics and stuff like that. But anyway, here's our nice model of a USS Baltimore here. They got a surprising amount of detail in these models. I mean, they're not super duper great. They kind of look like they're 10 or 15 years old in terms of graphics. I mean, they're pretty good, but I mean, there's better graphics out there, of course. But for what it does, for what the game is so far, I mean, it's got nice graphics. Now, getting back to what I was saying earlier about how this game is basically like, CMO or Command, Modern Operations Light. In a way, it kind of plays very similar in that it's an operational simulator. It's meant to take place at kind of that 15,000 foot view It's not really a tactical simulator, although it certainly does have a lot of tactical elements to it.
7001 is classified.
You don't say.
Submarine.
But yeah, it's like Command Light, and it has elements of grand strategy, but very, 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 very little. More strategic than grand strategy, I'll say, since you don't really deal with politics and stuff. But it does give you literally the entire globe to play around with in the scenario editor. All right, we've narrowed it down to an Alpha. So since that Alpha is literally coming right at me, I'm actually, I've turned to port, and I want to get around it into its baffles, so that's what I'm going to do. It's got an MGK 1000 Okean hull-mounted sonar. It does not have a towed sonar array. Okay. Yep, the fastest production submarine ever made. These, like, the Alpha could get darn near up to like 40 knots or thereabouts, because it has a liquid metal reactor plant. It uses lead bismuth to cool the reactor. And this is its only anti-submarine torpedo, a Set 65. It has a measly 8 nautical mile range. They won't be firing 5365Ks at us. That's an anti-surface torpedo. So yeah, Alpha is very, very fast, but noisy. Of course, anybody who is familiar with the movie The Hunt for Red October, you'll probably recognize the Alpha. It portrayed the Naval in that film. And USS Dallas was, of course, a Flight 1 LA boat in that film as well. And as I said, a lot of the things in this game are still work in progress. So, like, there's no Ohio-class ballistic missile submarine. There's no Typhoon submarines, ballistic missile subs in this game. In fact, based on the units that are in the game thus far, I think the game time period must end like around the early 80s or the late 70s, because there's no VLS. VLS came into, well, it was conceived in the late 70s, and it finally entered service in like 86 or something like that. So yeah, none of the ships, like the Ticonderoga class destroyers or whatever, they do not have VLS. They're pre-VLS, vertical launch system. So I plotted a circle around the Alpha there, around 8 nautical miles. So if I stay out of range of that, then he won't be able to shoot me with his torpedoes.
Make my depth. 5.
All right, take her deep. Make my dip. Just gotta be careful there. I don't want to turn too hard, or I'll foul the screw with the towed array there, or chop it up into little bits. That's what that long wire is leading out of the back of the submarine. It's a towed sonar array. Basically a big cable with a bunch of hydrophones along the length of it. So you can hear in your baffles and basically give you a long, good parallax bearings of a contact. So we're headed deep. Anyway, going back to what I was saying, like I said, this game is sort of like Command, because that's the only really game I have experience with in regards to like operational simulators, but with nicer graphics. Now, to be honest, I would actually like to get back into playing Command a bit more, but it's not that interesting to look at. You're just staring at the map all the time, and you're looking at these little NTIDS blips moving across the screen. So this actually gives you nice graphics and something to look at. So that being said, it is nowhere near as in-depth or powerful or as wargame-esque as Command. Command has like a near vertical steep learning curve, and it's like 100 times more powerful than this game. But the problem with Command, aside from the lackluster graphics, is that it's just menu overload. The whole game is just like you pull up a menu and like 50 billion things pop up in your face, and you're like, oh my god, like, all right, do I want to check this box? Do I want to input a value into that box or this box, or check those boxes and input that box? And it's like, ah. So I just want to plan a strike mission, blah, 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 and so on and so forth. So yeah, Command is really, really complex because it was built from the ground up as a operations simulator, a war game. This, on the other hand, you know, when you look at any game, you kind of have to define what its scope is, what it's designed to do and what it is not designed to do. This is not Silent Hunter, okay? This is not DCS. You're not going to be jumping in the cockpit and flying around the planes and pushing the little cockpit toggles and buttons. This is an operational simulator with some nice graphical elements to it. This is not Dangerous Waters. This is not Sub Command or whatever. You know, it's not nearly to that level of tactical fidelity, from what I understand. Although sonar is very well modeled in the game, but again, those games like that are meant to be really immersive, and they're meant to be like single platform tactical simulators. This game takes a much broader view. So I'm not expecting this game to play like a tactical simulator necessarily, although you could simulate a number of tactical scenarios in this game. So I don't know if I'm making any sense here, but my point is that there's no game that does everything 100% with full fidelity all at the same time. There's just no such thing. That would require such an insane amount of computing power, even today, which probably doesn't quite exist, and no developer would want to put time into making a game like that. It would be insane. And games like this, like a naval simulation like Sea Power, they're so niche in a way. They appeal to people who play war games and you know, sailors and people, you know, with military experience and stuff like that. We want this kind of experience. If you try to play this game like it's a first-person shooter or something, or it's a fast-paced, fast muscle twitch memory kind of game, it's not. It requires a good amount of study. The more you study, the better you'll be at this game, and the more patience you have, the better you'll be. So it requires time to learn and time to play. And that's the thing about these games. And if you're like me, right, you have a full-time job and you work a lot, you know, you don't have a whole lot of time to play these games, even though you want to. It's just like, oh man, I get home, I just want to eat dinner and relax for a little bit and then go to bed, you know? It's like, I don't want to put all my brain power into this one thing, so. Alright, we lost him for a bit. Now he picked up his sound signature again. Got him on sonar. I want to put the line on this circle to point in the direction that he's actually going. There we go, 8 nautical miles. I think we're okay to maybe turn in a bit. My objective, of course, was to skirt around him and get outside of his torpedo firing range, and now I'm going to try and get around him into his baffles, and I'll fire a torpedo into him. That's my grand strategy.
Track 7002 is classified. Hostile.
Yes, I'm willing to bet it's the Alpha. It's the only one that was there before. Now, I'm not going to talk too much about tactics and stuff here, because I'm, you know, especially in this particular scenario, because I'm not a submariner.
Maneuvering aye.
I work on a submarine though. Not an active duty one, a museum ship, but I work with submariners, or former submariners, I should say. One of which was formerly on USS Memphis. He was a nuclear engineer. So anyway, the extent of my knowledge of submarines just extends to my work, although I would never served on a submarine, so because there's not enough money to get me to want to serve on a submarine. I don't particularly like the idea of being stuck in a steel tube underwater for months at a time. And I kind of have this fear of being trapped underwater. Well, the Alpha's turn again. He's trying to clear his baffles.
Console, not crazy, Ivan!
Which way is he turning, Jones?
To the starboard, sir!
At this point, I was kind of wondering if he had heard me, but nope, he seems to be continuing, just turning around. He's just going straight, then just turning to starboard, circling back around, and resuming his original course. That's his crazy Ivan there. I'm just using time compression here, so Judicious use of time compression. One thing I will say about submarines in this game that I do find a little bit frustrating is that the developers chose not to implement nuclear weapons in the game, although they do have ballistic missile submarines. The ballistic missile submarines, they're the, for the US, they're the 41 for Freedom submarines. Those boomers, like, they exist in the game, but they're more or less like a storytelling or a scenario device, because you can't even use their ballistic missiles. It's like, well, okay. But the beauty of this being a video game and a simulator is that you can simulate, you know, all kinds of crazy scenarios. But, well, I guess I'll have to use command for that. If I want to start a nuclear war, you know, if I want to create mutually assured destruction with ballistic missile submarines and ICBMs and land-based bombers, then I guess I'll have to settle for command, huh? Fired our Mark 48 there. I'm gonna try and dogleg it a bit. So what I'm doing is I fired this torpedo down a certain bearing to go behind him, and then I'm gonna alter its course. Now the Mark 48 itself is wire guided. The actual speed and range of the Mark 48 is classified, but we believe greater than 20 miles and greater than like 55 knots or something like that. Although officially the figures are far less. Yeah, that definitely looks like a 48. The game doesn't quite give a sense of scale for how big that torpedo is. That torpedo is like 19 feet long. It weighs like 3,700 pounds or something like that. I'll throw a picture up on the submarine I work on. We've got one of those. A Mod 1, I think, according to the documentation on the boat. So it's a big sucker.
Big son of a bitch.
Yeah, the Mark 48s, I mean, I can tell you a little about the history of it or whatever, but the Mark 48s were introduced in 1972 or 73, thereabouts. They're actually still in service today. Yeah, it's an anti-submarine and anti-surface ship weapon. You can find videos on YouTube of these things being used in test shots against target ships, against like ships that are part of a sink exercise. The Mark 48 will detonate underneath the keel of a ship, break the keel, and literally snap the ship right in two. The whole ship just like buckles upwards in the middle, and then it kind of cracks and falls back down into the big hole in the water that was made from the explosion. Anyway, we're gonna follow the torpedo in here.
Contact faded. Track.
Contact faded. Well, hopefully the torpedo can find it. Yes, indeed. I mean, as of today, the Mark 48 has been in service longer than like the Mark 14 torpedo of World War II. Right, we used that up into the 70s, and then we introduced the 48. And we've been using the 48 ever since. It's had multiple upgrades. We're like on Mod 7. There's like, you know, technological inserts into this thing to make it even more capable. Torpedoes are fairly finicky weapons from my understanding. Very advanced, but they don't necessarily do well in like shallow water or littoral areas. So, but the Mark 48 has had a number of upgrades to try and improve its performance in various areas, situations that you might need to fire a torpedo in. Oh, it's gone active. Torpedo is active. Torpedo has acquired. High-speed screw. Torpedo in the water. Gonna make good use of the cinematic camera here. The flyby cam. Again, I'm still learning this game, so it's a learning process. Maybe next one I'll do a kind of a fun surface battle simulation. Maybe I'll start throwing in some carriers or something. I don't know. I recently read The Hunt for Red October, and I'm currently reading Red Storm Rising, so I've heard this game kind of compared to that as well. Like if the game Cold Waters is Hunt for Red October, then Sea Power is basically Red Storm Rising. If you want to compare it to literature. Alright, where's this Alpha? It's gotta be getting close. It's here somewhere. Oh, is that it? Was that it up ahead? Adjusting my course here, just in case he fired back in my direction. Yep, there it is. He might not even hear that torpedo. We probably made enough noise just by firing the thing out of the tube that, yeah, I don't know if he hears it. Dead now.
Hit track 7002.
All right, we got him. The Alpha is no more. All right, folks. Well, that is my little introductory video and first scenario I played in Sea Power. Decisive victory. We destroyed K316, the Alpha. We are victorious. See you later.